Hello, class. Welcome into another episode of Fantasy Football Teachers. We educate, you dominate. Today, we're going to talk about your fantasy playoffs and some strategies to use. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane. Joining me today, we've got Ben Fisher. You can find him at Spartan KPR and Kyle Olson at Kyle Olson FF. Olson, how are you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing well, man. Little rush to get going on here because I was telling you guys before this, I'm not a handyman. I just spent about an hour doing a 10-minute job of changing out a doorknob on a door. So all my friends from high school and college will understand because they know how handy I am. So, but other than that, I'm doing great.
Well, I mean, look, you're spending all of your time thinking about fantasy football, so it's understandable why you wouldn't be able to, fix a doorknob or whatever. Fisher, we got to get you a new Twitter handle because this is now what, take 3 because I've messed it up so many times.
Listen, Spartan Keeper, KPR. Played goalie most of my life playing soccer, so living the dream there. Olson, righty tighty, lefty loosey, bud. Come on, it's not that hard.
All right. So we're going from football to football. Let's talk a little bit about the fantasy playoffs. We all have some strategies to use because we're about heading into it, right? We're in week 13. We're heading into fantasy playoffs soon. Also, let's start with you. What's one of the strategies you use heading into fantasy football playoffs?
All right. Well, first of all, let's go, baby. It's playoff time, so I'm excited. Let's roll. But yeah, so the first thing I'm going to talk about, something I like to try to do when I can is blocking my opponent on waivers. So when you're going to the playoffs, you need to pay careful attention to who is in your opponent's lineup. So one of the biggest things I do in the playoffs, way more than the regular season, is I'm looking at my opponent's lineup. So I'm studying my opponent's lineup about as much as I'm studying mine. And I'm trying to kind of predict who he's going to start. Obviously, people kind of have it in there, but people make changes. So I'm keeping an eye on injuries, and I am looking at spots where my opponent may be looking at a waiver spot at a receiver, running back, whatever position it is. And if I have a higher waiver priority than my opponent, I'm going to try to steal whatever player I think he's going to get just to make his life a little bit harder. It's actually a lot of fun too because I've done it a few times and got some pissed off texts from people that weren't very happy with me. So hey, you get to make some people mad, which is always a fun part of fantasy football too. So, but just paying attention to your opponent's lineup, looking to basically steal players from them that they could use. You might not use them. It's not necessarily a player that you're even going to put in your lineup, but you're going to keep your opponent from putting that player in your lineup. So that is one of my biggest things is just trying to make sure you're not just paying attention to your team. Make sure you're paying attention to your opponent. And you know what? If you're really into it, you can even look ahead to a possible matchup in the next week and try to take a guy that a possible opponent might need the next week. So that's just like a little bit next level thinking, but it makes it a lot more fun too.
So playing keep
100%.
playing keep away, basically. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
it's a nice move. It's a
absolutely.
smart move, right? To go in and steal a player away that you think your opponent might use. I don't know how many people right now in fantasy playoffs are picking up players that they're going to throw into their starting lineup. But
Sure.
in the event of an
Sure.
injury or something, that's the
Yeah.
way to do it. If you can keep your opponent from getting
Yeah.
somebody that they're going to use against you, you got to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, look, if
and
you're
and you can even dive into a little further. I mean, one, you should always be looking at your opponent's lineups and kind of judging where you stand, right? If you're an underdog by like 30, 40 points, then you need to start playing, ceiling players, right? Playing those Hollywood Browns who could get you 0, but could also get you, 30 if he ever hits this year. But if you're winning, maybe playing those Danny Amendola type players where their ceiling's probably 18, 19, but their floor is, 15, 16. Uh, but you could also become just a straight jerk by picking up players too. And then, so I play in a couple of leagues where you play defense and kickers. And a lot of times, I mean, you both know, like I'll drop my kicker to pick up a player and just let him play on my bench all week to just hear the news and see what happens. And then come Sunday morning, I'll drop the player and pick up a random kicker because, no offense, kickers, but don't matter. And come Saturday night, if I was playing you, Trevor, you could just be a straight jerk and just pick up every kicker real quick and just drop them. And then I have no chance of picking up those kickers because they're on waivers and I can't get them until Monday morning or Wednesday when waivers run because of the games. So if your opponent does that, just be aware and be a jerk. We're here to win. We're not here to be nice.
I have actually never thought of that before, Fisher. So, yeah, now you know what I'm gonna do. What I'm gonna do to you next time I'm going against you.
Listen, if I make the playoffs, it's on.
All right, so for mine, I've got this one was near and dear to me. This is one that I heard a few years back, and I have tried to subscribe to this. I actually won a championship because of this strategy last season. It's you don't want to become so attached to the guys that got you there that you make mistakes in terms of who you start. There is no loyalty point. So yes, there may have been a player that you're turning to all throughout the season. But if something happens, that player's got a little bit of an injury or a questionable weather situation or a really bad matchup, and you've got a replacement that you feel like is in a better spot, don't feel like you have to stick with the guy that got you there. Again, there are no loyalty points in fantasy football. Last season, I started Ryan Fitzpatrick over my guy, Dak Prescott, in the fantasy championships because Dak had a little bit of a shoulder issue. Turned out, had I stuck with my guy, I would have lost. But Ryan Fitzpatrick led my team to a championship. So you do not have to stick with the guys that got you there if there is a clear move that you think will improve your chance of winning.
Yeah, Lynn, first and foremost, nice humble brag with the championship brag there.
Yeah.
We heard it. Second, I think absolutely. I mean, I was in a position last week where I had Kyler Murray and, my backup was Kirk Cousins. And in hindsight, obviously, Cousins had a better game. Murray goes into that game with a shoulder injury. There were some talks, obviously, that the game wasn't going to shoot out as much. So I was loyal to Murray and I played him over Cousins, and obviously that cost me that week's game because Murray did not have a good game. He has some shoulder issues. So 100% agree with what you said. You need to pay attention to the news. You need to pay attention to little things. It leads into what I want to talk about, like don't get cute. I think there's a fine line between, paying attention to the news, understanding there are some injuries to players. Players are in better matchups. You look at Fitzpatrick, like you talked about, he's a straight gunslinger, right? He's going to throw a couple interceptions more or less, but he's just going to chuck the ball around. And interceptions, as much as they lose points for quarterbacks, they don't technically hurt quarterbacks because it's going to put them in a better game script or they're going to be throwing more, right? Because a quarterback throws an interception, his team scores. Well, that just means the quarterback needs to get it back out there and throw again. So
the Jameis Winston effect.
It doesn't. Right, the Jameis Winston effect, right? I don't care if he throws three interceptions, but he's going to chuck for 350 and put up 3 touchdowns as well. So absolutely pay attention to matchups, but don't get cute. I mean, there's news with Dalvin Cook this week that he's been limited in practice. Obviously, he did not have that stealing game last week. But players studs as well. Don't get too cute. If there's a player in a better matchup that is also, equally well or just a tier below, switch them out, but don't be playing Frank Gore over Dalvin Cook because of matchups. Play Dalvin Cook.
Yes, 100% agreed. You can shoot yourself in the foot trying to get cute. I did that. I did it last week with a team. I tried to start Kendall Hinton. Right, he was eligible for wide receiver. I threw him in, knowing he was going to be a quarterback, and that backfired on me. He wound up getting me negative points. Sometimes you can do a little bit too much, or you're worried about matchups, or doing something kind of sneaky or whatever. Start your studs. Start the guys that you know are going to get in there and they're going to produce for you. All right, Olson, what's your next tip?
Well, I just want to tell you first, Trevor, thank you for starting Hinton because my win over you helped me secure a playoff spot.
I feel good about that one though because you beat me by like 100 in that one. So didn't make the difference. So at least I feel a little better there.
And I just want to follow up real quick with what you guys said though, because it can definitely go both ways. But what I like is just going with your gut too. Mm-hmm. Going with your gut and just you have to be able to accept if your call is wrong, right? So I like the Hinton start. It didn't work, but that's going to happen. So I like being able to take risks. Last year I was up in Flagstaff with my family at the North Pole Experience, and I had benched Drew Brees against the Niners in the playoffs to start Tannehill, and Tannehill was actually ranked higher. And I watched Drew Brees in that league we're in, Trevor, where it's just crazy points, put up 50-some points, and I lost. And then I watched my team put up huge weeks next couple of weeks. I was up at the North Pole Experience. I hope they didn't, but I'm pretty sure some random kids heard some bad things come out of my mouth. And so I'm sorry if any of you are watching. I'm sorry, kids. But
so not only did you lose your fantasy league, but you also probably ruined Christmas for a few small children, which is perfectly acceptable given the circumstances.
Fantasy football Christmas. Sorry, fantasy football, fantasy football. But,
so the hit thing, Lane and Olsen. I was sitting Sunday morning last week with my 7-year-old. This is his second year doing fantasy football, and so we just do like a family league. Half the teams take it seriously. The other just doing it, to support the 7-year-old. But he doesn't know a lot, so I help him, and I was like, yeah, pick up Hinton. And then we were having this conversation, like, should you play Hinton? He's a quarterback. He's wide receiver eligible. And I'm like, absolutely. Play him in the slot. He's like, no. And 7-year-old was right. Benched Hinton, didn't play him. Whereas, thank goodness he wasn't eligible on DraftKings. Like, I would have lost my entire bankroll playing Hinton. Sometimes, don't overthink things.
Right.
A receiver's eligible for quarterback, but he had what was their team total? 10? Their team total was 10 points?
Yeah.
Even if they matched their team total, who cares? Things sound good in the moment, but you need to start looking at things from the perspective that you have normally. Is this really a good play? So, while I would have done it, I'm glad a 7-year-old told me I'm going to.
There you go. Okay. So I'll go to my next one. Sorry, I had to side note that because as you were talking about that, I just started thinking, and I was like, oh my God, this is right along with what happened to me last year.
Hang on, Olsen. Before you start ruining more Christmas, we just want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. If you heard Olsen, we apologize. We really are here to support you. Merry Christmas to all.
Coach, it's nothing your athletes haven't heard on the sidelines already anyway, so it's all good. All right, what's your next tip?
All right, so my next one, it's another waiver pick or another waiver tip, but it's look for guys that are going to have potential big games in the playoffs. I know that sounds like, well, those guys aren't going to be there, but as an example, in a deep league that Trevor and I are in, I was able to just pick up Cam Akers. Now, if things keep going the way they are, I'm not using Cam Akers. He's a bench stash, but the last 4 games he's had 9 carries, 10 carries, 5 and 9. That's not crazy, but he's getting some action. He had a touchdown last game. He had a receiving touchdown the game before, so he's at 9 points, 14 fantasy points. In a deep league, a guy that's putting up basically double digits almost last 2 weeks, that's a guy that I'm going to put on my team because we all know that Rams backfield is impossible to figure out right now. However, if you get an injury to either Brown or Darrell Henderson, now Akers just gets elevated a little bit more. And if he plays well and he gets a shot, and he did play well last week with 9 runs for 84 yards, and McVay likes Akers, I think, a rookie like that this time of year, we've seen it where those young guys, they get a chance and all of a sudden they're putting up big games. I'm not saying he's going to have just huge weeks, but he just put up 14 last week. He could easily, if he gets more opportunities, be putting up 17 to 20 points a game. So I'm picking him up just in case Henderson gets hurt or Brown gets hurt. And now in a deep league, that's a guy that I can start in my flex spot and be pretty confident that he's going to get me double-digit points because he's getting the action now. So I think the talent's there with him. And like I said, I'm picking him up before anybody else can. So it kind of goes with my blocking opponents also. I'm going to be the one that has him just in case he does become a guy I can use. If he doesn't, that's fine. It's a deep league. I didn't have to drop a really strong player to get him, so I'm not that worried about it. But looking for those guys that you think if one thing breaks for them, because those are the guys on waivers, right? You're not going to have some stud on waivers, obviously, but look for those guys that, hey, if one thing breaks for them, they could be a guy that makes a difference for me in the playoffs. So you just got to be scouring the waiver wire. You got to be seeing if those guys are available. And like I said, that guy was available for me in a pretty deep league. So those guys like that are out there. And if you can afford to, drop somebody to get them, I say do it.
Yeah, great point. You go for the ceiling plays right now, especially, and this is going to kind of piggyback with what I'm going to talk about on my next one. But your bench kind of serves a different purpose in the fantasy playoffs, right? During the bulk of the season, you've got guys that, okay, I'm going to put this guy on my bench. I'm going to have him there because at some point I'm going to have a bye week and I need to throw somebody in. But realistically, all right, Sammy Watkins, right? Say he's sitting on your bench. You're not going to start him in the playoffs, right? Or hopefully you're not. You're not
Right.
throwing him in there. You've got these guys that you've stuck on your bench that, okay, well, in a bye week, this guy can come in and get me 10 points, and that's about all I can hope for, right? So get rid of those guys now. Go for the ceiling plays. Goes for the guys who can actually help you win a league. And maybe that's Cam Akers. Maybe something happens. The Rams have that second round draft capital that they spent on him. They know that that they want him to be a guy for them. That he can they can really take over the backfield. So who knows? Maybe something happens with Malcolm Brown, or maybe Akers just starts to absorb more touches as he gets a little bit more accustomed to the NFL. But that's a great pickup. You go grab him, and who knows? Maybe he winds up being a guy that can lead you to a championship, or at least be a part of a championship winning team. And if not, no big deal. He's a guy you grabbed off of waivers anyway. For mine, though, I want to talk about the DST. A lot of leagues don't use them. I kind of like not using DSTs, but a lot of leagues still have them. And so now is a time when you're heading into the playoffs to not just look at this upcoming week for your defense, but to look ahead a few weeks, because again, you can use your bench a little bit differently. And if you have an opportunity to go ahead and grab a defense that you think is in an advantageous matchup, maybe 2 weeks from now or a week away, right? A week ahead of time, you can go ahead and grab that defense now before your opponents get a chance to grab them. So use an extra roster spot. If that means you've got to carry a second defense, that's fine. But you want to be able to have those opportune matchups, and that can mean looking ahead, look at the schedule, see who's going to get the weak offenses, who's going to get the offenses that give up a lot of sacks, and then you go and you grab that defense that's going to be playing them. I think it's a good strategy to go with, and it's one that's helped me out quite a bit.
Oh,
yeah, I agree. You really need to understand your league. I've played in a league before where waivers actually close at the start of playoffs, and it sucks. But I'm on the mindset of only having one quarterback, right? I'll never have two defenses on my team. I most of the time drop my defense midweek anyways and just pick up random players, hoping like some news breaks, kickers as well too, right? I mentioned that earlier. But if you're in those types of leagues, you absolutely need to have a backup quarterback, right? Like who knows what's going to happen to your quarterback? You know, speedy recovery to Joe Burrow, but those things happen.
Yes.
It's the NFL. So if you're playing in those types of leagues, you absolutely need to have a backup. And like you said, Lane, if you have like a Sammy Watkins, a Marvin Jones, hopefully you're not starting those players. If you are, then
you're not in the playoffs anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Players that are even worse on your bench, right? So go ahead and drop those. Pick up the defense that has a good opponent or possible good opponent the following week, and hold two defenses, even three defenses if your team's very good and you think you could reach the championship. Like, hey, like you're not playing these bench players anyways. You have them, so you're blocking other people from getting them, as you mentioned, Olsen, and then you can drop your defense that you played this week once the week's over and add another player. So you absolutely need to understand your roster construction. You need to understand your league's construction, and you need to plan ahead. You absolutely need to know what's coming, where your team stands, and look ahead to the following weeks. Something I try to do in Survivor Pool and always lose when I do that. So don't do that in Survivor Pool.
1 week at a time.
One week at a time. Yep, that's it. That's it exactly.
March Madness, baby.
Yep.
Win and move on. Win in advance.
Fisher, what's your final?
I think that what you said is a great.
Oh, go ahead.
Is a great strategy for sure. Like it is, the play. It's a combination, right? Like playoffs, it is 1 week at a time. You've got to win to move on, of course. But those people, you're right. Not very many people are looking ahead. Only the guys that have been doing this for a long time or are really into fantasy football are the ones looking ahead 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So you're going to have an advantage over your league if you are doing that. I really like that, picking up two defenses or picking up an extra defense and just looking ahead. If you're in a really deep league, shoot, maybe you pick up three. I mean, I agree with you guys. I'm not big on defenses and kickers. I know we want to get rid of Ben. Really doesn't like kickers. I don't like them that much, but defenses, I'm not a big fan. But yeah, if you're in a league with a defense, it is what it is. Go ahead and use it to your advantage. Have two or three. If you have a deep bench, at least have two in the playoffs. And then, if you have to drop one and pick up another, do that. Like look ahead. It could win you a league. If you make a decision like that, it could win you a league. So I think that's a great.
we're talking also about kickers and defenses, but there's a lot of people that do like streaming quarterbacks, right? Streaming tight ends.
Sure.
There's a whole brand, late round quarterbacks, JJ Zacharyson with Numberfire, the whole late round quarterback model that he's talked about and has made famous. Like, there's a lot of people that stream quarterbacks every single week. If you are streaming a quarterback and you've made the playoffs, if your quarterback did not become a star quarterback and you are continuing to pick up quarterbacks each week, you need to do the same thing, right? You need to plan ahead for week 14, week 15, 16. Screw week 17 again, right? Like, we're not playing week 17, but you need to plan ahead if you are streaming quarterbacks, because you don't want to get blocked, or you don't want to have something occur where you don't have a good streaming quarterback. So while we're talking kickers and defense, these can even be for the important. I mean, they're all important, right? Because they all gain points. But these can even be for like the quote unquote stud positions that we're talking about with the quarterbacks, the tight ends. If you are streaming those, you need to plan ahead. And if you're not setting yourself up for success.
If you're not doing it, somebody else is going to do it, and they're going to grab that player before you and probably use them against you. So you have to be doing it. Fisher, final tip of the show.
Yeah, so on a little somber thought, we'll add on a sad note. There's a lot of us that don't make the playoffs, right? And there's a lot of us that know week 10 that we're not going to make the playoffs. And now this is for season long. If you're playing a dynasty, which are amazing. If you've never tried a dynasty before, absolutely reach out to some friends and try to get into a dynasty or start your own. But if you're in a season long league, you need to continue to play. You need to continue to put your roster, make sure you're playing all your positions every week, make sure you're playing your best players every week, and you're trying to win. There's integrity of your league, especially in a competitive league where there may be some money flying around. Even though it doesn't impact you, it may impact a person that needs you to beat that person. And if you're just laying down for nothing, right, you're not getting draft picks as you do in Dynasty, that's impacting the integrity of the league. So while this isn't necessarily a playoff tip, it relates to the playoffs. And I think you need to make sure, if you're in a season-long league, you are honoring your contract that you signed, basically by signing up for the league, to your fellow league mates, and making sure you are trying to field a competitive team each week in order to win.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be a dead team. And you know what? Let's be honest here. If you are a league commissioner and you've got somebody in your league doing that, that's just, they're not even filling out their lineup. They're not even starting guys, right? You've got guys who are on the IR that are in starting positions for them, and they're not changing it because, they're not in the playoffs. Maybe that's somebody that shouldn't be in your league next season. And so that's why you want to have people that are going to compete the entire time. And if you're not competing the entire time, then maybe it's not for you.
And if you're in a dynasty, I think you need to have that. You just need to, because if you lose, it could benefit you for draft picks, right? So you just need to make sure you're still honoring the integrity of the league, but you're still looking out for your team in dynasty as well, though, too. So making sure you're still fielding a team, you're not laying down. But hey, if you want to, put in a third receiver instead of your second or first, I mean, hey, you got to look out for your team for the next year too, as a lot of NBA teams do with or NFL teams, right? Tank for Tua, which turned out to be tank for Herbert.
Is that the explanation for the Jets this season? That's what they're doing. They're losing on purpose. They're really good at it.
That's what's
Listen, the Jets are probably going to take like Justin Fields and screw it up anyway. Although he looked really good against Michigan State today. Still a fan though.
He's still a fan.
Green.
There is almost nothing that pisses me off more in fantasy football than people that don't set their lineups. I freaking hate it. And I get so fired up, and I've sent so many texts out, and it fires me up so much, because they're like, "Why? Who cares? I'm out." You're screwing somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like you played hard early in the season and you beat somebody else, or you beat me because you were trying then, and now you're playing the guy that I'm tied with to go to the playoffs, and I'm playing the guy that's trying to win. And nothing pisses me off more, because I agree, it's the integrity of the league. Like, yeah, this is fantasy football, it's fun, but we're some of us we're playing for money, right? Like, I want people that are trying to win. And even in Dynasty, I agree, Fisher. I mean, there's definitely some creative ways you can do it. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I'm in a dynasty where it's going to benefit, a couple dynasties where it's going to benefit me to lose this week, but I'm still putting a pretty strong lineup out there. I think, there's some small things you can do, but even in a dynasty like the one that we're all in, that I run, I tell people like no tanking. Like you can't tank for the
Right.
draft pick. Like you have to have a full lineup. Now, can you do some things in there? Sure. You know, you can't stop somebody from setting their lineup a little bit different than you would say. And you have people that'll throw a random guy in there and actually does well. But oh my God, I'm so glad that you had that one, because that is one of my absolute pet peeves. It fires me up. People that don't set their lineups because they're out. It just, oh my God, I can't even. It almost pisses me off as much as people that join a league and then don't pay, or you have to ask them 15 times to pay. Just don't play if you can't pay the money. Sorry, just don't. I don't know.
It's this
Yeah,
time of
man,
year
I'll
that
get you.
pops
I'll
up
Venmo
too.
you that money here eventually. I'll get you. I'll get you.
Yeah, that's
Hey,
not
Lane,
my
before we
use
get out of here, I got one more.
Yeah.
Just quick. Just make sure you play your latest players in your flex.
Yes.
Simple as that. If you have 4 receivers, whoever is playing the latest, play them in your flex. 3 running backs. It does. I don't care. Don't get cute in who it is, but within your lineup that you would normally play, who's ever playing last that can fit in your flex, play them in your flex. It gives you the most flexibility, so you can judge what Olsen has said based on how your opponent has played. Hey, if you have a Danny Amendola, I keep calling him Danny. Danny Amendola type player in there, and you need 50 points. Guess what? He ain't gonna do it. You better play a worse player that hope they can do it.
Well,
And
he could be. Ben,
Danny
he could
Amendola's
be-
never doing that.
He could be Danny. It could become like that Aaron effing Boone type
It's-
thing. if
It's
Amendola wins you a league, then the other guy is going to call him Danny Amendola.
I'm a
because-
Lions fan, so I say "damn it, Amendola" a lot. So maybe it's just blending. with
I
Danny.
knew there was a connection there, and that was what it came down to. Yes, 100%. And that's even sometimes we get a little locked into, okay, well, this guy's my top running back and he's playing so I need to make sure that he's in this spot, or this guy, I only see him as a flex player, so I'm going to put him in this spot, but he plays Thursday night. No, do not put that guy in your flex spot. Put him up in a normal running back spot. Let him take that. The points are still the same, because then what happens if there's an injury or something like that, and you don't have a good backup running back that you want to put in, and then you can cost yourself a lot of points. Put him in the flex spot where it gives you more flexibility moving forward. So that's a good tip. All right, guys, let's wrap it up there. Appreciate everybody watching. Make sure you do subscribe right here to the Fantasy Football Teachers YouTube channel. Good luck this week. Hopefully you are all making the playoffs, and hopefully you're eventually on your way to a championship in your fantasy league. Till next time, everybody, stay safe and see you.
Good luck, everybody.